Chosen one, take a breath. Slow down your thoughts for a moment. You are not here by accident. This is not a random video that auto-played. This is not something you stumbled into while scrolling. This moment has weight on it. It has intention on it. It has timing written all over it. Something in your spirit already knew to stop here. And I need you to hear this clearly, not with your mind, but with the deepest part of you that has been carrying questions in silence. God has not lost track of you. This moment you're in, right now, this exact hour, this quiet space, this pause in your night was scheduled long before today. Heaven aligned this encounter because there is a shift happening in your life, and your spirit needed confirmation before your circumstances catch up. Chosen one, you are not late, you are not behind, and you are not forgotten. What you have been calling delay has actually been preparation. What felt like being overlooked was protection, and what looked like nothing was happening was God building something so deep that it could not be rushed. That restlessness you've been feeling lately, that sense that something is changing, even though you can't fully explain it, that quiet stirring that keeps you awake at night, asking, there has to be more than this. That is not imagination. That is alignment. You are standing at the edge of a transition from survival into purpose, from barely holding on into being divinely carried. God is moving you out of a season where everything depended on your strength and into a season where heaven begins to fund what He authored in your life. And I want to say this gently, because this is not hype, and this is not emotional manipulation. This is truth spoken slowly, so your spirit can rest in it. God does not fund what He did not author. And the fact that provision is beginning to shift around you is proof that your life carries assignment. Chosen one, for a long time you have been surviving, managing, enduring, making it through one season at a time. You learned how to be strong because you had no other choice. You learned how to carry weight quietly because no one else could carry it for you. You learned how to keep going even when answers didn't come. But here, this survival was never meant to be your permanent address. God allowed you to learn endurance. Yes, but He never intended for you to live your entire life in strain. The season where you had to force everything, figure everything out alone, and stretch yourself beyond what was comfortable. That season is ending. Not because you earned it, not because you proved yourself, but because the preparation is complete. Chosen one, there is a reason you could not shortcut this process. There is a reason God waited until now. If He had released the blessing earlier, it would have crushed you. If He had opened the door sooner, it would have distracted you. If He had accelerated the timeline before your identity was ready, you might have lost yourself in what He was trying to give you. So God slowed things down, not to punish you, but to preserve you. And now, something has shifted. You may not see it fully yet, but your spirit feels it. The fear that used to dominate your thoughts is losing its grip. The anxiety that once followed you everywhere is quieter than it used to be. The old urgency, the panic that said, "If this doesn't happen now, it never will," is being replaced with a strange, unfamiliar calm. That calm is not resignation. It is trust being formed, chosen one. God is transitioning you from survival into divinely funded purpose. And this transition does not begin in your bank account. It begins in your identity. Before God changes what surrounds you, He stabilizes what's within you. That's why this message is coming to you now, before the visible breakthrough, before the external shift, before the doors fully open. Heaven always speaks first to prepare the spirit, because once the movement starts, it moves quickly. And I need you to understand something very important tonight. Your delay did not disqualify you. It refined you. You were not passed over. You were set aside. You were not overlooked. You were being positioned. And while others were rushing ahead, God was making sure that when your moment arrived, you would be able to stand in it without shrinking, sabotaging, or self-doubting. Chosen one, you are entering a season where provision is no longer something you chase. It is something that follows obedience. You are entering a flow where heaven begins to actively resource what God placed inside you long ago. This is not about sudden wealth. This is not about flashy promises. This is about alignment, provision showing up at the right time, support arriving without begging, clarity replacing confusion, peace replacing constant pressure. God is not just meeting your needs, He is repositioning your life. And before we go any further, I want to do something important, not for the algorithm, not for numbers, but as an act of spiritual agreement. If this message is resonating with you, if something in your spirit feels seen, if you know deep down that this word is speaking directly to where you are right now, I want you to type AMEN in the comments, not as a ritual, not out of habit, but as a declaration that says, I receive alignment. I agree with God's timing. I am ready to move from survival into purpose. There is power in agreement. And sometimes the first step into a new season is simply acknowledging, yes, God, I trust you. Chosen one, as you sit here listening, let your shoulders relax. You don't have to figure everything out tonight. You don't need all the details. You don't need to see the entire path. You only need to know this God has already gone ahead of you. What feels uncertain right now is already organized in the unseen. What feels delayed is already in motion. And what you thought was missing is actually being prepared to meet you at the right moment. This is not the end of a hard chapter. This is the beginning of a different way of living. A way where you are no longer carrying everything alone. A way where heaven backs what you build. A way where your life finally reflects the purpose God authored, not just the survival you mastered. Stay with me. This message is unfolding exactly the way it needs to, slowly, intentionally, and on time. Because just like your life, nothing here is accidental, chosen one. Now that your spirit has settled into this truth, let's go a little deeper quietly, carefully, because this next part explains the season you just came out of. For a long time, your life felt hidden, not just unseen by people, but unseen by opportunity, unnoticed by systems, overlooked in rooms where you knew deep down you carried something valuable, something meaningful, something that mattered. And if you're honest, there were nights when you wondered if God had moved on without you. You didn't say it out loud. You didn't want to sound ungrateful. But the question lingered in the quiet. Why am I still here? Why does it feel like I'm ready, but nothing is opening? Chosen one, hear this gently. God hides what He is protecting. Seeds grow underground, roots form in darkness, and calling matures away from noise. The hidden season was not God withholding from you. It was God shielding you. Because if the weight of visibility had come too soon, it would have demanded something from you that you were not meant to give yet. You were not being delayed. You were being developed. While others were building platforms, God was building your foundation. While others were collecting applause, God was strengthening your spine. While others were being celebrated publicly, God was refining you privately. And I know that kind of process can feel lonely. There were seasons when you showed up faithfully, did what was right, kept your integrity, and nothing seemed to change. No recognition, no breakthrough, no visible reward. But heaven was watching every step. Chosen one, obscurity is not a sign of insignificance. It is often the evidence of importance. God does not expose what He has not yet secured. He does not reveal what He has not yet reinforced. There are parts of you that could only be shaped in silence. There are strengths you carry now that could never have formed under pressure from outside voices. There are lessons you learned, not because someone taught you, but because life forced you to lean fully on God. That's why you can carry weight now. That's why you don't crumble the way you used to. That's why chaos doesn't control you the way it once did. That's why your discernment is sharper, your compassion deeper, your endurance stronger. Those weren't accidental upgrades. They were forged in the hidden season, chosen one. Many people mistake hiding for rejection. They assume that if no one sees them, they must not matter. But God's pattern has always been the opposite. Before he reveals, he conceals. Before he elevates, he roots. Before he trusts publicly, he tests privately. The hidden season teaches you something crucial: how to hear God without validation, how to obey without applause, how to keep going when no one is clapping, congratulating, or even noticing. And that skill right there is what keeps you steady when the doors finally open. Because elevation exposes what preparation did not heal. That's why God took his time with you. You needed to learn how to stand alone with him before standing visible before others. You needed to detach your worth from outcomes. You needed to stop measuring your value by speed, comparison, or external progress. And if we're being honest, chosen one. There were moments when the hidden season humbled you, moments when you realized how little control you actually had, moments when you had to surrender plans, timelines, even identities you once clung to. That surrender was not loss, it was alignment. Because God cannot fund what you still need to control. He cannot sustain what you refuse to release. And he will not elevate what is still trying to prove itself. The hidden season stripped away the need to impress. It dismantled the urgency. It quieted the noise that once pushed you to rush. That's why now, right now, you feel different. You're not desperate anymore. You're not frantic. You're not chasing every opportunity that passes by. There's a calm settling in you that you didn't manufacture. That calm is the sign that the hidden season did its job. Chosen one, I want you to understand this. What you survived quietly is what qualifies you publicly. You learned patience when answers were slow. You learned faith when outcomes were uncertain. You learned obedience when clarity was incomplete. And heaven noticed. Every time you chose integrity over shortcuts. Every time you stayed kind when bitterness would have been easier. Every time you kept believing, even when disappointment knocked again. None of it was wasted. You may not have seen immediate results, but heaven was recording everything. And now, this is important, now that recording is turning into release. The season you are entering does not require you to shout to be seen. You won't need to force doors open. You won't need to explain yourself. What God reveals carries its own authority. When the time comes, and it is coming, you will walk into rooms that feel prepared for you. Conversations will unfold naturally. Opportunities will align without manipulation. Not because you suddenly became impressive, but because you became ready. Chosen one, your hidden season protected you from becoming dependent on validation. It taught you how to listen, how to wait, how to move when God moves, not when pressure demands it. That is why what's coming will last. Temporary elevation destroys those who skipped preparation. But sustained blessing rests comfortably on those who were trained in secret. You were trained in secret. And as this transition continues, you may notice something else happening around you. Certain things are losing their grip. Old fears don't speak as loudly. Old temptations don't pull as strongly. Old patterns feel foreign. That's because your identity has shifted. You are no longer the person who needed to be seen to feel valuable. You are becoming the person who knows who they are, even if no one is watching. That identity is stable. That identity can carry provision. That identity can steward influence without losing itself. Chosen one. The hidden season is ending, not because you demanded it, but because you completed it. You stayed when it was hard. You trusted when it was quiet. You endured when it felt unfair. And now, heaven is responding. Not with noise, not with chaos, but with alignment. Stay with me. What comes next will explain why the timing took so long and why it could not have happened any other way. Chosen one. There is something we need to speak about gently now, because it has lived quietly in your heart for a long time. The delay. Not the surface delay that people can see, but the deeper one. The kind that makes you look back and quietly ask yourself questions you never voiced out loud. Questions like, did I miss it? Did I wait too long? If this was meant for me, why did it take so much time? You didn't ask those questions because you lacked faith. You asked them because you are human, and because time has weight when you carry responsibility, loss, and expectation year after year. Chosen one. Hear this without resistance. God is not intimidated by time. He does not rush because he sees the full picture. He does not panic because nothing caught him off guard. And he does not measure calling by age, seasons, or comparison. What you call late is often God's definition of precise. You see, some callings cannot be released early, not because God is slow, but because the assignment requires depth. It requires discernment. It requires emotional maturity that can only be forged through lived experience. There are things God entrusted to you only after you learned how to survive disappointment without becoming bitter. Only after you learned how to wait without quitting. Only after you learned how to keep your heart soft in seasons that could have hardened you. That kind of preparation takes time. Chosen one, your delay was not empty space. It was filled with formation. Every year that passed was shaping something in you that shortcuts could never produce. You gained wisdom you didn't ask for, perspective you couldn't have learned in comfort, compassion you could only develop through endurance. And now, when God releases what He promised, it will not destabilize you. It will not inflate your ego. It will not derail your identity, because you are no longer desperate for it. That right there is one of the clearest signs that your time has come. Late calling does not mean lesser calling. In fact, many of the most impactful assignments are given later, not because the person was overlooked, but because they needed to be unshakable. God knew you would face moments when things didn't move, when prayers seemed unanswered, when progress stalled, and He needed to know that when the breakthrough finally arrived, you would recognize Him, not idolize the outcome. Chosen one, you were not waiting for God. God was preparing you to carry what was waiting. And there's another truth you need to hear, one that may settle something deep in you tonight. You did not miss your window. Windows in God's kingdom don't close the way the world says they do. They open when alignment meets obedience. They open when character catches up to calling. They open when your inner world can support what your outer world is about to receive. That's why comparison was so dangerous during your waiting season. You saw others move faster. You saw others get opportunities earlier. You saw others receive things you prayed for. And sometimes, quietly, you wondered why God's timing for you looked so different. But what you didn't see was what God was protecting you from. You didn't see the pressure those people weren't ready to carry. You didn't see the collapse behind some of those doors. You didn't see the cost they paid for skipping preparation. God was not withholding from you. He was sparing you. Chosen one. The delay taught you how to hear God without needing immediate confirmation. It taught you how to trust His voice, even when nothing around you agreed with it. That trust is rare, and rare trust is rewarded with responsibility. Now listen carefully to this next part, because it reframes everything you've been through. What feels like lost time is about to become accelerated purpose. God does not repay slowly. He restores strategically. When He moves in ways that redeem years, not emotionally, but functionally. You may not relive the past, but you will not lack because of it. The wisdom you carry now will compress timelines. The discernment you developed will prevent wasted effort. The clarity you gained will help you move with precision instead of panic. You are stepping into a season where things align faster, not because you rushed, but because you are finally ready to move. Chosen one. This is why the pressure has been easing lately. This is why you're no longer obsessing over the clock. This is why you feel less anxious about when and more grounded in who. This is why the fear of missing out is dissolving. You've crossed an internal threshold. You no longer need proof that God is faithful. You've lived it. You no longer need signs every day. You've learned how to recognize His patterns. You no longer measure success by speed, you measure it by alignment. That mindset is essential for what's coming next, because God is not bringing you into something fragile. He is bringing you into something sustainable, something that will last beyond a season, something that will not collapse under pressure. Late calling doesn't arrive loudly. It arrives quietly, confidently, and with weight. It feels less like excitement and more like knowing, less like adrenaline and more like peace, less like urgency and more like readiness. If you've been feeling that calm certainty, that sense that you don't need to rush anymore, that awareness that you're not chasing something is approaching you, that's not coincidence. That's confirmation, chosen one. The delay did its work. The waiting refined your vision. The stillness matured your spirit. The years you thought were slipping away were actually building the foundation that will support what's coming. You didn't miss it. You were being prepared for it. Stay with me, because the next layer explains why some of the hardest resistance you faced didn't come from strangers, but from people closest to you, and why God allowed that too. Chosen one. This next layer may touch a tender place, so let's move through it gently, because for many of you, the hardest resistance did not come from enemies. It did not come from outsiders. It came from people who knew your name, your history, your beginnings, family, close relationships, voices you expected to understand, but didn't. And if you're honest, that hurt more than any closed door ever did. You could endure struggle. You could survive delay. But being doubted by those closest to you, that cut deeper. You didn't need applause from the world. You just wanted understanding from home. You wanted someone to look at you and say, "I see it too." But instead, you were met with silence, skepticism, or subtle dismissal. Chosen one, hear this clearly. Without bitterness, familiarity often blocks revelation. People who watched you grow rarely know how to see you rise. They remember the earlier version of you, the one still learning, still stumbling, still forming, and their perception froze there. Not because you lacked calling, but because their lens was outdated. God never expected everyone close to you to understand what He placed on your life. In fact, if they had fully supported it too early, you might have leaned on their approval instead of God's instruction. So God allowed distance, not always physical distance, sometimes emotional, sometimes conversational, sometimes spiritual. You may have noticed that certain conversations stopped going deep, that certain people stopped asking questions, that your vision felt too big or too strange to share anymore. And quietly, you learned to carry it alone. That loneliness was not abandonment. It was training. Because calling that depends on affirmation, collapses when affirmation disappears. But calling that is anchored in obedience, stands firm when no one claps. Chosen one. God needed to know that you would keep moving even when your own people didn't validate the direction. That's why He let you walk seasons where you felt misunderstood. That misunderstanding did something powerful inside you. It forced you to separate your identity from opinion. It taught you how to hear God's voice clearly, even when familiar voices questioned it. And I know there were moments when you wondered if they were right. Moments when you thought, maybe I'm imagining this. Moments when you downsized your dreams just to keep peace. Moments when you silenced parts of yourself to avoid conflict, but something inside you never fully let go. That quiet persistence, that inner knowing that refused to die, that was God preserving the assignment, chosen one. There are callings that cannot be nurtured in familiar soil. Not because the soil is bad, but because it is too accustomed to the seed as it once was. God often moves His chosen ones into environments where no one knows their past, so they can grow into who they're becoming without being constantly reminded of who they were. And sometimes that environment isn't a place, it's an internal boundary. You stopped explaining. You stopped proving. You stopped trying to convince people who were never meant to carry the weight of your vision. That wasn't pride. That was wisdom being formed. Now, listen carefully to this next truth, because it releases a lot of unspoken pain. Their doubt was not a verdict on your calling. It was confirmation of its weight. Light exposes comfort zones. Growth disrupts familiar dynamics. And elevation often unsettles those who are not prepared to grow with you. God did not allow that resistance to wound you permanently. He allowed it to strengthen your spine. Because where you are going, you will need to stand without consensus. You will need to obey without agreement. You will need to move when confirmation comes from heaven alone. And you are ready for that now. You no longer feel the same pull to be understood. You no longer feel the need to be validated. You no longer need permission to become who God called you to be. That shift didn't happen overnight. It was formed slowly through disappointment, prayer, and surrender. Chosen one. Some relationships were only meant for your survival season. They supported you when you were becoming, but they are not designed to walk with you when you are building. This does not mean they are bad people. It means their assignment in your story has changed. And God is gentle in how He handles this. He doesn't always remove people dramatically. Sometimes He simply lets the connection loosen naturally, quietly, until it no longer defines you. That is mercy. Because what God is bringing into your life next requires emotional clarity, spiritual confidence, and inner peace. He is not sending you into it while you're still seeking approval from voices that cannot see the full picture. Chosen one. The distance you felt was not rejection. It was insulation. God was protecting what was forming in you from premature exposure. He was guarding your heart while He strengthened your identity. He was making sure that when elevation came, it would not be sabotaged by unresolved need for validation. And now, you are different. You don't need to announce what you're becoming. You don't need to defend what God is doing. You don't need to convince anyone. What God reveals will speak for itself. And when the time comes, some of the very people who doubted you will be surprised, not because you changed suddenly, but because they never noticed how much you were growing in silence. That moment will not require explanation. It will require humility, because God is not elevating you to prove a point. He is elevating you to fulfill purpose, chosen one. Release the need to be understood by everyone. Release the expectation that family or familiar voices must validate what God has spoken. You are not dishonoring them by obeying God. You are honoring the assignment placed on your life. And as this continues to unfold, you will notice something else. God is about to show you why the resistance was so personal, and why your life carries weight far beyond your own story. Stay with me. The next layer reveals the generational purpose tied to your calling, and why the pressure was heavier on you than on others. Chosen one. If you've ever wondered why your life felt heavier than others, why the resistance seemed stronger, the pressure more constant, the path more demanding, this is where understanding begins to settle. Because what you've been carrying was never just about you. From the beginning, there has been something different about the way life responded to you. You noticed it early, even if you couldn't explain it. The struggles felt layered, the challenges felt repeated. Certain patterns seemed to follow your family line, your history, your name. Cycles that didn't start with you, but somehow landed on you. You may have grown up watching things repeat: financial strain, emotional distance, broken trust, unfulfilled potential, quiet resignation. You may have promised yourself, "This ends with me," even before you knew how. That awareness was not random, chosen one. You were born as a disruption to a pattern. Some people are called to build within a system. Others are called to interrupt it. Your calling carries the weight of interruption, the kind that breaks cycles rather than manages them. That is why the pressure intensified early. Generational assignments often reveal themselves through resistance. The enemy does not fight what poses no threat. The heaviness you felt was not because you were weak. It was because your obedience would affect more than your own life. You were never just fighting for a better season. You were standing in the gap for those who came before you and those who will come after you. That's why the waiting was so long. That's why the preparation was so deep. That's why the isolation was so real. God does not entrust generational shifts to shallow roots. He needed to know that when the weight increased, you would not collapse under it. He needed to know that when the blessing came, it would not be consumed by old patterns. He needed to know that when influence arrived, it would be stewarded with wisdom, not impulse. So, he shaped you, chosen one. The reason you felt different in your family, out of place at times, misunderstood at others, is because you were not designed to repeat the story. You were designed to rewrite it. And rewriting always requires confrontation, not loud confrontation, but spiritual confrontation. It requires someone willing to sit in discomfort long enough for truth to surface. You carried questions others avoided. You felt dissatisfaction others normalized. You refused to settle where others learned to cope. That made you uncomfortable to some, but heaven was watching. Every time you chose growth over familiarity, you weakened the grip of old cycles. Every time you refused bitterness, you broke something quietly. Every time you kept believing in a better future, even when evidence was thin, you shifted something in the unseen. Generational change rarely announces itself. It happens silently, one decision at a time. That's why you felt tired in ways others didn't understand. You weren't just managing your own emotions, you were carrying unresolved weight passed down through years of unspoken pain, unmet dreams, and deferred hope. But hear this now, because it marks a turning point. The weight you carried is about to become the authority you walk in. God does not waste pressure. He converts it. The very things that tried to overwhelm you are becoming the foundation of your strength. The battles you fought internally are shaping the wisdom you will carry outwardly. The endurance you developed is preparing you to stand when others cannot. And this is where divine funding becomes necessary. Because generational callings cannot be sustained by human effort alone. God is not transitioning you into provision simply so your life becomes easier. He is resourcing you because the assignment attached to your obedience requires support, clarity, and peace. You are being funded not just financially, but spiritually and emotionally to ensure that what begins with you does not collapse under strain. Chosen one. This is why you could never fully fit into the survival mindset, even when you tried. Something in you resisted it. You could manage survival, but you were never meant to stay there. Survival maintains patterns, purpose breaks them, and breaking patterns always demands a different kind of strength. You were taught early how to endure, but now God is teaching you how to receive. You were trained in resilience, but now you are being invited into alignment. That shift is not small. It means you are no longer just reacting to life. You are being positioned to influence it. It means the chaos that once followed you is being replaced by clarity. It means the instability that once defined your environment is losing its authority, because when generational patterns break, peace follows. Chosen one. The reason the enemy fought your mind so fiercely was because your clarity would set others free. The reason discouragement tried to wear you down was because your perseverance would rewrite outcomes beyond your reach. Your life carries a hinge moment, a turning point where history changes direction. And that is why heaven is so intentional with your timing. God is not releasing you into this next season unprepared. He is strengthening your inner world so that when influence increases, humility remains. When provision flows, wisdom governs it. When doors open, discernment guides your steps. This is not about becoming better than those who came before you. It is about becoming faithful to what they never had the chance to complete. You are not replacing their story. You are redeeming it. And as this realization settles, you may feel something soften inside you, resentments loosening, old judgments lifting, compassion replacing frustration. That is healing. Because generational breakthrough requires forgiveness, not superiority. It requires understanding, not blame. You are not here to condemn the past. You are here to close a chapter, chosen one. What you are stepping into will feel lighter, not because responsibility disappears, but because alignment removes unnecessary weight. You no longer need to carry what was never yours to finish. You only need to obey what is yours to begin. And as this obedience continues, God will show you how He funds generational purpose not all at once, not recklessly, but wisely, sustainably, and in perfect timing. Stay with me. The next part will reveal how God elevates without crushing, and how the provision coming into your life is designed to support, not replace, the person you've become. Chosen one. Now we arrive at a delicate place in this unfolding one that must be handled with care. Because elevation sounds beautiful until you've seen what it does to people who were never prepared to carry it. God is not careless with promotion. He is intentional. He does not rush you into visibility, influence, or provision until your inner world can support what your outer world is about to receive. This is why your journey unfolded the way it did. You may have wondered why opportunities didn't explode all at once, why things opened slowly, why provision came in stages instead of floods, why God seemed measured, even cautious with your life. It wasn't delay. It was design, chosen one. God never elevates to impress. He elevates to entrust. What He is bringing into your life now is not meant to replace who you've become. It is meant to rest on who you've become. That is the difference between divine funding and worldly gain. Worldly gain demands more striving. Divine funding removes unnecessary strain. You are not being lifted into a season where you hustle harder. You are being lifted into a season where alignment does the heavy lifting. This is why the first thing God restored in you was not opportunity, but peace. You may have noticed it quietly arriving. A peace that doesn't panic the way it used to. A peace that doesn't need constant reassurance. A peace that allows you to pause without guilt. That peace is not laziness, It is maturity, because only someone who trusts God deeply can rest while movement is happening in the unseen. Chosen one, God is funding what He authored in your life, but He is doing it in a way that protects your soul. He is not giving you more than your identity can hold. He is not opening doors that would demand you become someone you are not. He is not blessing you in a way that would resurrect old survival patterns. That is why your identity had to shift first. You are no longer trying to prove your worth. You are no longer negotiating your value. You are no longer desperate for outcomes. That desperation would have corrupted the blessing. Now, hear this clearly. Provision is coming to support your purpose, not to replace your dependence on God. This is not about sudden excess. It is about steady supply. It is not about spectacle. It is about sustainability. God is teaching you how to live from abundance without becoming anxious about maintaining it. He is showing you how to receive without clinging, how to steward without fear, how to move forward without rushing. And this is new territory for you. You were trained in survival. You learned how to stretch little. You learned how to brace for lack. You learned how to prepare for disappointment. But divine funding requires a different posture. It requires trust instead of control, flow instead of force, obedience instead of overthinking. That's why God has been gently dismantling your old relationship with pressure. He has been retraining your nervous system, your thoughts, your expectations. You are learning how to breathe again. Chosen one, the elevation ahead of you will feel surprisingly calm. Not because nothing is happening, but because you are no longer carrying what was never meant to be yours. You will notice decisions becoming clearer, conversations aligning more easily, support appearing without you chasing it. This is not coincidence. This is alignment becoming visible. And as provision increases, something else will be tested, not your faith, but your boundaries. God will not fund chaos. He will not sustain disorder. He will not bless what drains your spirit. That's why certain distractions are losing their appeal. Certain obligations are falling away. Certain connections are becoming quieter. This is not loss. It is refinement. Because elevation requires space. You cannot carry new responsibility while clinging to old weights. You cannot steward increase while entertaining constant noise. You cannot walk in clarity while allowing confusion to live rent-free in your mind. God is not being harsh with you. He is being precise. Chosen one. The reason He waited until now to elevate you is because now you know how to say no without guilt. Now you know how to rest without fear. Now you know how to trust without demanding timelines. That readiness is rare. And rare readiness attracts divine backing. You are entering a season where provision will meet you where obedience takes you, where ideas come with resources, where vision comes with support, where obedience is met with confirmation. Not all at once, not recklessly, but consistently. This consistency is what changes your life, because for the first time, you are not bracing for the next collapse. You are not preparing for loss. You are not waiting for things to fall apart. You are building, and you are building with heaven's endorsement. Chosen one. God is not elevating you to isolate you from others. He is elevating you so you can stand without losing compassion, so you can carry influence without losing humility, so you can walk in provision without forgetting dependence. This is why your spirit feels anchored now. Even as things shift, even as doors open, even as life accelerates, you are not shaken. That stability is the miracle. Because storms may still come, but they no longer control you. Pressure may still exist, but it no longer defines you. You are being trusted with more because you are no longer ruled by less. And this is important to understand before we move into what comes next. Elevation is not the destination. Alignment is. Provision is not the goal. Obedience is. God is funding your future because your life carries weight, not because you demanded it, but because you were faithful in preparation. You did not rush this. You did not manipulate this. You did not force this. You waited. You surrendered. You became ready. And now, very quietly, heaven is responding. Stay with me. The next part will seal this journey in prayer and declaration, not to end the story, but to anchor you in the truth that what has begun cannot be undone. Chosen one. Before we close, I want you to stay right here for a moment. There is no rush. Nothing you need to do next. Nothing you need to figure out tonight. Just allow your spirit to rest in what has already been spoken. You have listened with an open heart. You have allowed truth to settle in places that were once tense, guarded, or tired. And now, this final part is not about learning anything new. It is about sealing what God has already begun inside you. So wherever you are, if you can, gently relax your body. Let your shoulders drop. Slow your breathing. And if it feels right, close your eyes. Guided prayer. Father God, we come before you in stillness, not to ask for proof, not to demand answers, but to rest in your presence tonight. You have spoken clarity where there was confusion. You have brought peace where there was pressure. You have reminded this chosen one that nothing in their life was wasted, delayed, or forgotten. Lord, we acknowledge that you are the author of their story. And because you are the author, you are also the provider, the sustainer, and the finisher. Father, we release survival tonight. We release the habit of bracing for loss. We release the mindset of scarcity. We release the fear that says, "What if it doesn't work out?" In its place, we receive trust. Trust in your timing. Trust in your wisdom. Trust in your provision. Lord, thank you for the hidden season. Thank you for the waiting. Thank you for the quiet years that built strength, discernment, and maturity. Thank you for protecting this chosen one from premature exposure and unsustainable blessing. We ask now that you gently align every part of their life with what you have already approved in heaven. Align their thoughts, align their decisions, align their relationships, align their opportunities. Where there has been anxiety, release peace. Where there has been confusion, release clarity. Where there has been weariness, release rest. Father, we trust that you fund what you author. And because you authored this life with intention, we trust you to supply everything required to fulfill its purpose at the right time, in the right way. We surrender control. We surrender timelines. We surrender outcomes. And we receive alignment. In Jesus' name, amen. Declarations speak slowly. Allow pauses. Chosen. 1. Now receive these words as declarations spoken over you. You do not have to repeat them out loud unless you want to. Just let them settle. I declare that you are aligned with God's timing. You are not late. You are not behind. You are exactly where heaven intended you to be. I declare that the season of survival is ending. You are stepping into a season of provision, peace, and divine support. I declare that what was delayed was not denied, it was prepared. I declare that God is funding what He authored in your life. Ideas will be supported. Vision will be resourced. Obedience will be met with provision. I declare that your identity is stable, secure, and anchored in truth. You no longer strive for approval. You no longer fear lack. You no longer question your worth. I declare that generational patterns stop with you. Cycles are broken. New paths are opened. What begins with you will bless those who come after you. I declare that peace is your baseline. Clarity is your companion. Discernment guides your steps. I declare that what God has begun in you cannot be undone. What He has aligned cannot be reversed. What He has approved cannot be blocked. You are carried. You are supported. You are covered. Spiritual sealing. Chosen one. Let this truth settle deeply. Now, you are not waiting for a breakthrough. You are standing in the middle of one. What shifted tonight was not emotional. It was spiritual. something aligned, something released, something settled into place. You don't need to chase what is coming. You don't need to force what God is arranging. You don't need to explain yourself to anyone. Your responsibility now is simple. Stay surrendered. Stay obedient. Stay at peace. Heaven is already moving. If this message strengthened you, comforted you, or confirmed something your spirit already knew, let your agreement be known in a quiet way. You can comment Amen as a seal, not for visibility, but as a personal marker that says, I receive what God has spoken. And if you feel led, share this message with someone who has been carrying weight in silence. Someone who needs to be reminded that delay does not mean denial. Now, breathe again. There is nothing more you need to do tonight. Rest in the truth that you are fully seen, fully known, and fully supported by the one who called you. Good night, chosen one. What God has begun, He will faithfully complete.